First, I want to talk a little bit about the inaugural John C. Roth Endowed Speaker Series, which begins this weekend with our presentation from Kerry. The John C. Roth Endowed Speaker Series was established through the generosity of John's sisters, Dr. Mary Elizabeth Roth and Anne Mary Roth, who are here with us today. John's sisters established this series to honor the life and legacy of John C. Roth, a Catholic whose life reflected a deep commitment to faith, to family, and to community. John came of age at a time when many LGBTQ Catholics lived quietly and often without recognition or connection. Yet he was able to remain deeply committed to his Catholic faith. Through his witness, his life, and his advocacy, he demonstrated that it was possible to live with honesty and with integrity. The John C. Roth Endowed Speaker Series was created not only to honor John's memory, but to also recognize the countless LGBTQ Catholics whose lives of faith have enriched our church, often without acknowledgement. Through this continued series, Outreach will bring distinguished speakers to our conferences and events for years to come. We are most grateful to Dr. Roth and Ms. Roth for their generosity, vision, and their support. Thank you. It's especially fitting that the inaugural speaker in this series is someone whose life and whose legacy embodies these values of service, integrity, and standing in proximity with those who are pushed to the margins. Kerry Robinson serves as president and CEO of Catholic Charities USA, leading one of the largest charitable networks in the nation and supporting agencies that serve millions of people every year. Before joining Catholic Charities USA, Kerry was the founding executive director of Leadership Roundtable, where she worked alongside bishops, clergy, and lay leaders to strengthen the church through greater accountability, transparency, and effective leadership. Throughout her career, Kerry has been a powerful advocate for lay leadership, renewal in our church spaces, and our shared mission to serve those most in need. At a moment when our church is being called ever more to walk closely with one another and to encounter Christ where he has always been at the margins, Kerry's voice offers both wisdom and hope, and it makes her our perfect inaugural keynote for this new series. So please join me in welcoming Kerry Robinson, the president of CEO Catholic Charities.
Wow, it is so wonderful to be with you. Such a joy. I have been privileged to give many talks over my entire adult lifehood, frankly. Rarely have I entered into a community preparing to deliver one of these talks and been greeted with so much genuine kindness and joy and compassion. I am so, so grateful to all of you for having me here. Happy 5th anniversary, Outreach. It's wonderful. I am so proud of what has transpired over these 5 years and deeply, deeply committed to your mission. I want to first express my gratitude to Connor Reedy, Jack Consoli, and Alessandra Rose for their planning of this gathering and for the outstanding job they do advancing the mission of outreach. I also want to thank my good friend Michael O'Loughlin, the former executive director of Outreach, who extended the initial invitation to me to speak today. As Providence would have it, I was with Michael yesterday in Atlantic City for the Catholic Media Association's annual conference at which you received your award. He extends his very best to all, and we are both very, very proud that you received recognition and acknowledgement at the Catholic Media Association. Above all, I'm grateful to my beloved friend, Father Jim Martin, whose brilliant mind and pastoral heart has meant so much to so many. For your leadership and vision, your faith and your courage, your humor and your integrity, thank you, Jim. Jim knows that as a rule, I am a joy-filled person, so it will surprise him a little that I'm beginning my remarks today with a heartbreaking story, but it has an important lesson for us. 2.5 years ago, my husband and I woke to the news that our friend of nearly 15 years had died. We knew that almost certainly he had been murdered. You've likely heard of our friend. His death made international news. His name is Alexei Navalny, and he was Russian President Putin's opposition leader and an anti-corruption advocate. We first met Alexei Navalny when he came to Yale University for the Yale World Fellows Program, an international leadership residency program of which my husband, Michael Capello, served as director. Alexei brought his wife, Yulia, and their young children, Dasha and Zahar, with him to campus for the semester. It was our habit and indeed privilege to host Yale World Fellows and their families at our home on Sunday afternoons for a simple home-cooked meal. Our children, who were young at the time, for the 8 years my husband served as director of the program, were deeply influenced by our international friends from 78 countries. We took a particular liking to Alexei and Yulia and their children, and we stayed close to the family during their occasional return trips to the US. When news of Alexei's death was announced, we heard from many who knew of our friendship with him. It was striking how many people, despite never having met Alexei, felt a genuine loss themselves, confessed to deep emotion at the injustice of his death, and felt that this was a great loss not only for his family, but in a certain cosmic sense for the world. What Alexei's life and death and the response to his life and death revealed to me is our deep yearning for moral heroism. We are hungry for moral heroes and the compelling values that inform and sustain such heroism. Alexei's courage was evident from our very first days of meeting him, a quality that is evident in the Oscar-winning documentary Navalny about his life, presaging his death. To be repeatedly falsely charged and imprisoned by Putin, released only to be brazenly poisoned, saved by courageous pilots and doctors, dramatically airlifted out of Russia to Germany, and after months of medical rehabilitation, returned to Russia knowing he would be arrested and likely worse, is extraordinary. Those who loved him begged him not to return to Russia for his own safety. That he did so because of a radical commitment to the cause for which he had devoted his life shining a spotlight on the corruption of his country and the brutality of its president, and advocating for justice, truth, and democracy is a sign of Alexei's integrity. He gave his life for others, for truth, democracy, an end to the war in Ukraine, an end to corruption in his beloved country. And after his death, Alexei's example continued to inspire acts of service and moral courage all over the world, but especially in his home country. Thousands of people attended his funeral in person, even though they knew they might be targeted by the government and arrested as a result. Equally courageous and committed is his wife, Yulia, who has taken up his mantle of leadership. It's a powerful and inspiring reminder. Courage begets courage. Selflessness inspires selflessness. The starting point for living a life of service is to pay attention to the role models in our midst, to look for moral heroism and concomitant tenacious dedication to the values which inform such heroism. What resonates with you? What moves your heart? Who restores your faith in humankind? Who makes you want to be a better person? Who ennobles you? These examples do not have to be as stark or dramatic as that of Alexei Navalny. Living a life of service does not and should not require you to willingly give up your own life. But I assure you that if you look with intention, you will easily identify examples in your own life. Identifying and emulating the people who serve as our own moral heroes helps clarify our purpose and direction in life. That practice has radically influenced the trajectory of my own. For as long as I have been aware, I have loved and held the potential of the Catholic Church in the highest esteem. Its explicitly religious mission has formed the person I am. That it is the largest humanitarian network in the world renders me forever committed to its health and vitality. It has also, at times, utterly broken my heart. I was exposed to the church at a very young age through the Raskob Foundation for Catholic Activities. 5 generations of our family have served the church through the instrument of this foundation. 80 years ago, our great-grandparents, Helena and John Raskob, established the philanthropic foundation with 2 intentions. They wanted all of the foundation's resources to be used exclusively to support the Catholic Church's religious and humanitarian work throughout the world, and they wanted their children and descendants to be stewards of the foundation's resources as volunteers. Participating in the work of the foundation has radically enlarged our perspective of the church and introduced us, even as teenagers, to the astoundingly diverse forms of ministry under its auspices. As a child, I was drawn to women and men, ordained, religious, and lay, whose faith mattered deeply to them and who stood at the vanguard of human suffering all over the world, and responded by alleviating that suffering, by providing food, safe shelter, education, health care, by advocating for those in distress, by championing justice, by building bridges, by reaching out to those on the margins, by sowing the seeds of peace. I was mesmerized by people who dedicated their lives to others through service. I observed that while these childhood role models often bore witness to the worst of what humankind does to one another and to our planet, there was a palpable sense of joy about them. Joy. Their lives were imbued with purpose and meaning. I admired their faith, their interior freedom, and their joy. I aspired to be like them, but suspected I could never be so holy, so selfless, so other-centered. From a young age, I basically entreated God to let me do something behind the scenes with my own life that would positively contribute to the lives of my moral heroes. As I grew into an adult, I thought I would make my life's work in the field of faith-based philanthropy, helping Catholic funders and foundations make sound philanthropic investments in people and social enterprises and communities like outreach. It is both funny and true that if you want to make God laugh, tell God your plans. Instead of working in the sector that gave money away, I was asked to be responsible for raising it by serving as the Director of Development at St. Thomas More Catholic Chapel and Center at Yale University. This was a job I neither wanted nor was qualified for in any way. Father Bob Boulogne, the Catholic chaplain at Yale, who would become my closest friend and prime collaborator, called me to explain the $5 million capital campaign, assured me it would be a piece of cake. There's obviously a lot of fundraisers in the crowd. He's told me it would be a walk in the park and that there would be absolutely no stress or anxiety involved. And then he asked me to be the person to lead this fundraising effort, adding, "Kerry, your name came to me in prayer." Still to this day, the best development pickup line I have ever heard. Let me be very clear. I did not want this job. I dreaded the very idea of this job. I scrambled to think how I could decline politely. I suddenly remembered I was pregnant with my second child. I told him the happy news. There was silence on the phone. And then, with genuine enthusiasm, he congratulated me, told me how happy he was for me, and said, "You can work from home." And then he said, "I know I am springing this on you, Kerry. Just pray about it for 5 days. That's all I ask. And whatever your answer in prayer after 5 days, of course I will honor and respect that." Great, I thought. After 5 days of praying, my no is going to be so eloquent. Anyone who has taken prayer seriously knows it is almost always the one praying who is changed. To my astonishment, even to this day, 5 days later, I called him and accepted. We served together for almost a decade, modeling lay clergy collaboration, holding up a vision of what a Catholic intellectual and spiritual center of consequence could look like at a world-class university. We raised 15 times the original goal, a staggering $75 million. I always say, but who's counting? I am. We introduced 14 new programmatic initiatives, built a Caesar Pelli-designed Catholic student center on Yale's campus, added a third Sunday liturgy to accommodate the growing number of students and faculty participating, and raised the bar of Catholic campus ministry across the country. This is what we learned. Generosity is humankind's birthright. We are all called to be generous and to be catalysts to inspire generosity in others. A common misconception is that generosity is only for the very wealthy. Believing that lets the rest of us off the hook and denies ourselves a full, rewarding life. Central to Christianity is the conviction that one finds life by first giving it away. This point is best illustrated by a story about another moral hero, Mother Teresa. The setting is a food dispensing center in rural India in the midst of severe poverty and hunger. Once a week, one member of every family in the impoverished village would line up with a single bucket, patiently waiting their turn to have the religious sisters fill their bucket with dry grains of rice. A novice was shadowing Mother Teresa on this day as she methodically greeted each person and filled each bucket. Before long, an elderly woman reached the front of the line, and to the novice's surprise, had in her possession 2 buckets. Mother Teresa greeted her by name and proceeded to fill 1 bucket. After thanking Mother Teresa, the woman turned to leave, stopping a short distance later to empty half of her full bucket into the second empty bucket. The novice, miserable to be witness to the extent of the pervasive hunger and deprivation, turned to Mother Teresa and asked, "Why did we not fill up both buckets for that poor elderly woman?" Mother Teresa replied, "There is only enough rice for each family to receive 1 bucket. She has her neighbor's bucket and her own. Her neighbors are ill, and no one from the family is able to come to collect the rice. She is emptying half of her family's share into her neighbor's bucket to bring to them because she cannot carry more." Overwhelmed with frustration and sorrow, the novice said, "Surely we should fill both buckets and take the second bucket to the sick family for her." Mother Teresa stopped what she was doing and admonished the novice. "These are among the poorest and most destitute people you will ever meet. Never take away the right of another person to be generous." Never take away the right of another person to be generous. We are all called to be generous. Sure, we can and should be generous with our financial resources. We can also be generous with our time, with our attention. We can volunteer. We can share what we have and what is precious to us. We can donate. We can be generous by extending the benefit of the doubt, by presuming goodness in one another. We can be generous listeners. We can be generous by extending forgiveness. Think about one moral hero in your life. Inevitably, you will find a reservoir of generosity there too. For several years, I had the privilege of serving as the executive director of the foundation responsible for the Opus Prize, an annual $1 million international humanitarian award that honors people of any faith whose lives are dedicated to the alleviation of human suffering. The prize recognizes unsung heroes who are addressing the world's most persistent social problems. All of the people honored through the prize are inspiring, but it was the laureate from 2023, Bishop Paride Taban, whose story affected us in a particularly deep and lasting way. Bishop Taban was the founder of the Holy Trinity Peace Village in South Sudan. Throughout the brutal civil war in his country, Bishop Taban refused to leave. As a prominent faith leader, he was given every opportunity of safe passage out of the country. But he would not leave while his people were suffering and in danger. He stayed to be close with the people of Sudan. As waves of violence washed across the country, he was in grave danger. Bishop Taban was captured, imprisoned, and tortured. For 100 days, he was detained and subject to brutality. And when he was finally released, the very first thing he did was return to the place of his captivity to bring food to his captors. Who among us cannot see the radical sanctity in that action, that instinct, that utter empathic magnanimity? In the face of so much violence and poverty, despair and isolation, his faith compelled him to effect peace and to provide nourishment and hope and to set the conditions where all could flourish by creating the Peace Village. Bishop Taban passed away shortly before being named the Opus Prize laureate. He actually died on All Saints' Day. Despite his death, his example, like that of Alexei Navalny, continues to inspire a world in need of moral courage, of goodness, of vision, of hope. People who live lives of service have a contagious, irresistible quality to them. And it is precisely that infectiousness that drew me to my current work. For it is the honor of my lifetime to be part of the Catholic Charities Network, to work with such accomplished and dedicated colleagues, to witness moral heroism every single day in every single agency across thousands of our neighborhoods. The life-changing ministries of Catholic Charities are varied and vast. Every day, in every corner of the United States, Catholic Charities agencies provide comfort, hope, and relief to people in need, regardless of their faith or background. A common misperception is that Catholic Charities exist to serve Catholics in need. In fact, we serve all people of all backgrounds. The only criterion is you are a member of the human family and you are in need. As the famous saying goes, we don't serve people in need because they are Catholic. We serve people in need because we are Catholic. Our clients face practically any challenge you can imagine. A family whose home was destroyed in an instant in a tornado. An expectant mother who is unsure of how to care for a newborn. A veteran looking to develop new skills and launch a new career. A single father struggling to afford groceries for his family. A refugee charting a new life in an unfamiliar country. A senior barely able to afford her medication and living in a dilapidated apartment. A person in recovery struggling with depression. A family materially impoverished living out of their car. This could be any one of us. Any of our family members, any one of our neighbors. One of my all-time favorite observations by Father Greg Boyle is, this is what we seek, a compassion that can stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. The people we serve all have one thing in common. They need help, they yearn for compassion, and they know that they can find it at Catholic Charities. The scale of our network's work is difficult to comprehend, but I'll share just a few numbers to put it in perspective. There are 169 Catholic Charities agencies spread out across all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and 5 U.S. territories. Last year alone, Catholic Charities staff and volunteers around the country provided care to more than 16 million people in need. They served 30 million meals to those who were food insecure and hungry. More than 64,000 clients received critical career training and were placed into new jobs. Our agencies provided 3.2 million nights of emergency shelter for those experiencing homelessness. And they responded to a staggering 42 disasters in 19 states, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, wildfires, and more, helping reeling communities and families recover and rebuild. All of this was just in 1 year. We have been at this work in the United States for more than a century. While each Catholic Charities agency across the United States is independent and tailors its services to the unique needs of its community, we share the same basic mission, and at times respond as a network to massive challenges affecting impoverished families around the country. An example occurred this past fall when SNAP benefits lapsed for 42 million Americans as a result of the prolonged shutdown of the federal government. This meant that the most vulnerable among us, people struggling to make ends meet, suddenly faced even greater uncertainty about how they'd find and afford food for their families. It also meant that Catholic Charities food pantries and soup kitchens, already stretched thin, would experience a tremendous surge in demand for their services. Catholic Charities USA responded immediately, much as we do in the wake of a large-scale climate-related disaster. We launched an emergency nationwide appeal to support families and individuals who had been forced into deeper food insecurity. Donations poured in from across the country. We used every single dollar raised to purchase food from our food distribution partners in bulk and at a generous discount, and shipped more than 2.5 million pounds of fresh fruit and vegetables, plus shelf-stable milk and other food, to 129 Catholic charities in 45 states to distribute to hungry, worried families. Every agency that requested emergency food received it. This inspiring response revealed the same truth Mother Teresa shared with her novice. When people know that their neighbors are in distress, they instinctively want to help. While the upheaval and anxiety brought on by the SNAP lapse was truly terrible, a positive unintended consequence was increased awareness about the unacceptable level of hunger in the richest country in the world. That awareness led to action, and that action was organized and purposeful. In the face of human anguish and injustice, it is tempting to protect our hearts and look away, or to believe that our individual acts of mercy or service or justice cannot possibly make a difference. But remember, generosity inspires generosity. Service to others is habit forming. It calls forth in us a desire to belong, to be part of what is right and just. As my friend Mac McCarter likes to say, caring alone won't heal the world, but caring together will. This is why I love the Catholic Charities Network, described by a colleague as organized love. Our work, day after day, fills me with a deep reservoir of hope. And this year, we're seeking to share and spread that hope all over the country through a new and exciting initiative. For 2 days last July, we hosted 42 staff and volunteers from various Catholic Charities agencies in our offices in Alexandria, Virginia, just across the river. These 42 people traveled from all over the country to be professionally recorded, telling one story of an interaction with a client that particularly touched their hearts. These video testaments are the centerpiece of the People of Hope Museum, a mobile museum that in March began traveling the country for 2.5 years, sharing powerful stories of neighbors helping neighbors through the work of Catholic Charities. Our hope is that this museum will inspire people of goodwill around the country to find ways to encounter, accompany, and serve their neighbors in need. We had nearly 300 members of the Catholic Charities Network apply to be featured in the museum, All of their stories were touching and inspiring. It was incredibly difficult for our team to choose only 42. I won't fully do it justice, but I'd like to briefly describe one of those stories for you today. Mary is a longtime employee of Catholic Charities Diocese of Trenton in New Jersey. A number of years ago, she was speaking to a crowd of people at a mall during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, when a man in his 20s came up with his mother and asked Mary if she remembered him. She apologized and said she didn't. The man then told Mary that he had been 8 years old when he and his mother came into Catholic Charities' safe house. Mary had been their case manager. The man explained that Catholic Charities was the first place he ever felt safe and free. He told Mary that he was now a father and a high school teacher and a coach. He then told her, "I'm the first man in 5 generations of my family who isn't violent. My son will grow up to be a good man." Suddenly, Mary looked into his eyes and recognized him. The 8-year-old boy who had once needed shelter and support was standing before her, whole and strong. She was deeply moved. That moment made Mary truly appreciate the impact of her work through Catholic Charities. One small act of kindness can have ripple effects that break cycles and change family trajectories, that allow hope to blossom and spread throughout communities and our nation. That is the goal of the People of Hope Museum. In addition to these powerful 42 stories, the museum includes a poverty simulation experience, an audio library with excerpts from books on service, community building, and generosity, an interactive wall of national and state level data on poverty, and a recording studio in which visitors can share their own stories of who gives you hope. Having toured the museum myself, of course, and talked to a number of visitors about their experiences, I am confident you'll be moved if you have the chance to visit it. The People of Hope Museum and the powerful stories within it will restore your faith in humanity. These storytellers, Mary and her colleagues from around the country, are reasons for hope. The tenacity of their faith in action represents the Catholic Church at its very best. To be clear, a life of service can be led by anyone, and anyone can devote their life to making this a better, more just and merciful world. You don't need faith to do this. I am struck, however, by the presence and persistence of faith in the examples of the change agents and moral heroes I have encountered over the whole course of my life. Before dismissing faith as irrelevant to a meaningful life of service, consider that faith offers 2 important things: a community to sustain, inspire, encourage, console, forgive, and hold us accountable, and access to transcendence. Working to make the world better and more just, living a life of service, even in a faith-based context, can be demanding and difficult. Working to reform the church, to build bridges, to call the church to greater levels of holiness, hospitality, and effectiveness can also be daunting. For 20 years, in the wake of the revelations about the church's abuse crisis, I worked with Catholic leaders across the country through Leadership Roundtable to bring greater accountability, transparency, justice for victim survivors, and contemporary best managerial practices to the church. The church is our faith family. When your family is in crisis, you do everything possible to effect healing and reconciliation. To do nothing felt like I would have been complicit. For all of my deep love and dedication to the church, at times it has truly, utterly broken my heart. My heart is broken when the church fails to live up to the very values it espouses, when it has caused pain and left its members feeling excluded, forsaken, and abandoned. In times of desolation like this, the best advice I have ever been given came from a beloved professor, spiritual director, and sister of mercy, Margaret Farley. She said, "Remember what it is you most love about the church and membership in it. Name what you love. Claim what you love. It will provide ballast to allow you to navigate with fidelity and focus when you are disappointed and discouraged." I have taken this advice to heart and highly recommend the discipline. My list is long and wide. I love Catholic social justice teaching, our church's rich intellectual tradition, sacramental life and imagination, mercy, the Eucharist, the primacy of conscience, prayer and transcendence, forgiveness, the preferential option for the poor and most vulnerable, the injunction to be Christ-like. I love our church's emphasis on forming young people and education. I love that wherever there is human suffering in this world, the church is at the vanguard of providing relief, promoting justice, and advocating for peace. I love our church's appreciation of beauty and aesthetics, the art and architecture, music and literature our faith has inspired. I love that Catholic Charities represents the teachings of the gospel made manifest, concretely in real life, and that this work makes a tangible difference in the lives of the most vulnerable all around the country. And in my grief over losing my dear friend, Father Bob Boulogne, to brain cancer, I am grateful more than I can say for our church's articulation of the community of saints, the conviction of eternal life, the fact that love does not end with death. I'm reminded of Father Gino Walsh's famous injunction: followers of Jesus are promised two things. Your life will have meaning, and you will live forever. If you get a better offer, take it. When you have moments of doubt, discouragement, disappointment in our church, I hope that you will find and focus on your own sources of inspiration and encouragement, your own examples of moral heroism. It is never too late to become the people we are meant to be, and it is never too late to be generous, to serve, to cultivate a disposition of other-centeredness, and to work for the common good. Some people have lived their entire lives in service to others. Some immerse themselves consciously in service when they retire. The Ignatian Volunteer Corps is an example of a ministry that prepares and places retirees in service. Anyone at any age who genuinely gives of themselves to help others, especially those who are poor, who are suffering, who are excluded, who are in need of mercy and help, always, always, always say the same thing: I received far more than I gave. I'll end with one more story that demonstrates how central a call to service is to our wiring as human beings. One evening, several years ago, neighbors, relatives, and friends somewhat spontaneously gathered on our porch in New Haven, Connecticut. Lively conversation ensued, and then the subject turned rather suddenly to the best way to die. The question was specific in its intensity: How would you like to experience your own death? Over bottles of wine and candlelight, we took turns articulating the pros and cons of the myriad ways any one of us might experience our own death. It was not entirely morbid. I mean, there was wine involved. One friend was certain that dying in her sleep peacefully at the end of a long life would be the most desirable. Another suggested that she would like to die suddenly and quickly without warning, ideally after a spectacularly joyful celebration with everyone she knew and loved. Okay, that was me. I just hope it's not after this talk. Another suggested that he would prefer to have as much time as possible with the knowledge of a terminal illness in order to make amends, to thank his friends and his family, and to be intentional about giving away everything he possessed. And so the conversation ensued until the eldest at the table, my father, turned to the youngest at the table, our then 13-year-old daughter. Sophie, you have been very quiet and very attentive, but you have not yet volunteered an answer. Do you have an opinion on the way you would most like to die? Everything became still and silent. I held my breath. Too late, I wondered if she was too young for such a deep, existential, distressing discourse. Perhaps she had never seriously considered the matter. Now, at the center of everyone's attention, aware that a response was being asked of her, she replied very simply, "Yes, I hope I die saving someone else's life." None of these answers were bad answers, but only one was truly Christ-like, the child's, the teenager's. Now, being her mother, it still makes me cry. I burst into tears on the spot when it was happening, and we all looked around at each other. Being her mother, I will, of course, tell you that Sophie is an extraordinary young woman, but as a student of the human condition, I'll also tell you that her instinct is not unique. We are all naturally predisposed to being people of compassion, of empathy, of generosity, to be people of hope. And all of us sometimes stray from those natural instincts, but thankfully there is a clear path back. It is through the Gospels, through the promise of the Easter miracle, through modeling our own behavior on that of our moral heroes and heroines. People like Alexei Navalny, Bishop Taban, Mother Teresa, Mary from Trenton, and Father Jim Martin. Identify the causes you care about the most and try to make a difference. Find your own moral heroes and heroines and strive to emulate them. Be a person of hope. Be a beneficial presence in the world. When you cultivate the discipline of being other-centered, you begin to take genuine delight in the good fortune of others. And when you take genuine delight in the good fortune of others, you will never be without a reason to celebrate. And we celebrate what is right in order to find the strength and courage to fix what is wrong. I can promise you this, the more you focus on serving others, on finding ways to be generous, the more fulfilling and joyful and full your life will be, and the more your witness will inspire others. I find the outreach community and your participation this weekend deeply, deeply inspiring. You are setting an example for me, for all Catholics, and for all people of goodwill, with your faith, your tenacity, your joy, your generosity, and your commitment to being part of the solution. Thank you for making our faith family stronger. Thank you for helping our church grow in holiness. Thank you for your moral heroism. Thank you for your refusal to give up. And thank you for being a reason for my hope and the hope of so many. It has been an honor and truly my joy to be with you today.